So I have so many like follow-ups to that. So one of the things that I think about is so I'm in SLAW, right? And so that's sex and love addiction, right? And one of the things that I had to be so I'm in a monogamous relationship now. And so one of the things before I got into my relationship is I had to be very careful about not make it for to make sure that my sexual behavior didn't border or didn't become entirely like addictive, right? Like and some of my behavior was like very compulsive, like I had multiple partners all the time and it would interfere with work and all types of other things. And so I'm wondering, like, in your own experiences, do you ever feel like do you use an addiction lens or like framework to think about like sex?
Um, yeah, so I don't identify as a sex addict. I definitely do identify with impulses around sex. After becoming sober, I was diagnosed with ADD, and I'm doing like a non-stimulant treatment. But in like looking at my patterns of use, I never really planned to be like, oh my God, I'm gonna buy a bag of meth and use this weekend. It would be I get myself into a situation where I'm at someone's house and it's there and I use, and it's a very kind of like impulsive decision. Um, so I had to like find and build in a framework to kind of like keep a distance with that. And I think one of the most important things that I've learned for me is that if I have a plan in place, I can't impulsively change that. Like when I wasn't using an app or sniffies and I would go travel, like I couldn't just by myself be like, oh, you know what? I'm horny. I want to get on sniffies. Like that would require like a conversation with my sponsor, a conversation with my partner about ways. It's not saying I can't do it, but there needs to be some intention and thought around doing it and how to be safe doing it. And if I'm not able to do that and 100% walk away, then it's not the right time to do that.
That's right. That's one of the things that one of the things I really appreciate about my slaw sponsor. One of the things he says is like, if it's urgent, it's not sober,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I love like what you're describing here, which was like, like, yes, you can engage, you can have the kind of sex you want, you can have the kind of freedom in life that you want. But this idea of like intention, which is another way I think of saying like pausing and really thinking about like what it is that you're doing before you're doing it. Right. Does that feel like a fair characterization of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's 100% spot on.
Yeah. So I'm curious about like, you just moved to Pittsburgh, you're in Pennsylvania. That is a very different place from San Francisco. I know that because I'm like, like I said to you before we went on air, I'm from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is 6 hours from where you are now. And what's it like to be there as a sober person, as someone who's coming from San Francisco?
Yeah, that part's a lot different. I'm used to walking a block down the street and going to a same CMA meeting that's mostly men and mostly queer men. Here there's no CMA. It's just NA and AA. There's two in the whole city. There's two specific LGBTQ meetings. So it's been a little bit different having to switch to NA. I feel like I had a very progressive sponsor in San Francisco, and Pittsburgh isn't that progressive, so it was a little bit of a journey to find a sponsor here. But I eventually found someone, and I don't know. I don't feel as motivated to go to meetings. I know I need to, but I am more motivated when I travel to go to meetings. I just went to IML. IML has leather meetings at their event. I just went to AIDS Life Cycle. They have meetings, so I really
It's
enjoy when I
IML.
travel.
Was it International Men's
Mr.
Leather Day?
Leather, yeah.
Mr.
It's
Leather. Okay.
it's
Okay.
a fun event in Chicago during Memorial Weekend.
Okay. Brandon writes, why don't you start your own CMA meeting there?
So I haven't put too much effort into it, but I have at like a few meetings asked if people would be interested. Um, and at least the people that I've asked, it doesn't seem like crystal meth is their main substance, drug of choice. It seems like the opioids are more prevalent here. And yeah.
That's a good answer, Brandon. I hope you got what you need from that. I was saying when you said you moved to Pennsylvania, my first thought was like, holy shit, I wonder how he's adjusting to that. Because whenever I go back home, I'm out and I'm pretty public, about my like status and about like just all things about my life. But whenever I go back to Pennsylvania, there is a part of me that still feels uncomfortable. So I'm wondering, you don't have the same sober community that you did out here. How are you, I guess, managing that?
Yeah, so I'm a fister, and my first couple of friends that I met here have been at fisting parties, and they've been great. Um, uh, being on the apps, like, it is different, like, and not necessarily from a sober aspect. Like, I now that I use the apps, I explicitly put sober and no meth in my profile, and I think that filters out most of the people who are partying. But it is very like pause phobic here. Like on sniffies, like if you're positive, a lot of people like don't even want to bother hooking up with you, even if they're on prep and even if I'm undetectable.
Yep. Yep.
Which
Yep.
is weird.
Yep. Yeah, I feel that. And in a way, I'm, I wonder if like, does that kind of feel like it, um, like a regression? Like whenever I go back to Pennsylvania, I always feel like I'm stepping at least 15 years back in time, especially when it comes to like being a game. Like one of the things, like sometimes I forget I'm HIV positive because either everyone around me is HIV positive or because everyone's on prep and doesn't give a fuck. But when
Yeah.
I go to Pennsylvania, I like for example, my family to this day is like, don't tell anyone you're positive. Like when I'm back home, like no one needs to know that you're HIV positive. Um, so I'm wondering if it feels like you're stepping back in time while you're there.
Yeah, yeah, very much. Like I have a similar experience. Like I forgot that it was HIV positive in San Francisco, but I'm very much reminded of it here, especially hooking up with strangers. I saw a very interesting like article or meme or something. I think it was from the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. But it was bringing up the question that like in the age of being undetectable, like should you have to disclose that you're HIV positive? And I know that like legally, a lot of the laws are still fucked up, and you need to disclose in certain states legally. But like I think ethically and morally, if you're not presenting a harm to someone and you can't transmit, I don't see any reason why that's anyone else's business.
Yeah, HIV legislation is so interesting to me. That's like a whole that's like a whole other episode is HIV legislation. There are places I think in Louisiana where if you don't even have to have sex with someone, but if you're dating someone and there's like the chance of hooking up, that could be criminalized. Right. So HIV legislation is all over the place, and there are places where people have done jail time. There are people in prison now because of HIV disclosure and HIV laws. Um, so that's very interesting. So we have a few quality minutes left on the clock, and so I'm wondering if you have, I'm wondering if you have, it's Pride Month. We've talked about recovery. We've talked about sex, and I'm wondering if, like, for folks listening who have some anxieties around, Pride Month and like staying sober during these times, if you have any advice or any ideas that you want to share with them.
Yeah. I guess my advice would be have a game plan. Always kind of know what you're doing. I like to like stay super busy and distract myself. I actually find like events like Pride Weekend or like IML to be less triggering because there's just so much to do and keep yourself occupied and busy with. And if I ever feel like uncomfortable doing something, or if there's a chance that I'm not able to say no to math, that's just a sign that that event, that night at Steamworks isn't appropriate. It doesn't mean that Steamworks in general isn't appropriate. It's just maybe do something different that night. I think being kind of just like open with someone, if whether it's your sponsor or like your partner or a buddy about what you're into and what you want to do. Like if you want to get into some like weird, kinky, extreme stuff over the weekend, like find someone that you could talk about that with so it doesn't feel like a secret. Um, and then if you are like using substances, go out and get test strips, get clean needles, keep yourself safe.
Amen. That's so great, Stefan. What a nice way to land. So before we check out, not check out, but before we like land the plane, I just want to thank you again for coming on. This has been a really nice conversation. Thank you for volunteering your time, and I wish for you a very happy Pride Month.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Happy Pride.
Thanks. The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBT recovery community. We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth. You can find more information, including all the ways to contact us, at www.castrocountryclub.org/podcast. Tune in every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels. Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.